In this video, we will be looking at some of the racket tools that you can find on the Tennis Warehouse University website and how the data can help us when assessing current setups or choosing rackets for future setups. And we will be looking at the Shotmaker tool first. And if I pull it up on screen, you'll be able to see all the data inputs. I don't change any of them, they are all there by default. And that's just to keep it simple for when we are comparing setups. The racket that I have in my hand here is the Prince Vortex 300 gram, and I'm going to pull it up in the Shotmaker tool. We'll have a look at the data. So I'll scroll a bit further down and you'll be able to see 4 bits of data there, which is firstly the distance. So the distance covered by the ball before it lands. You've got the shot speed in miles per hour. You've got the spin that the ball comes off the string bed at, and you've also got the net clearance, which is an indicator of the launch angle. And it's interesting to note that there is a relationship between the speed and the launch angle, in that generally the higher the speed that the racket can produce, the lower the launch angle. So if we take that a little bit further, even though you can play a faster shot off of the racket, the distance covered might be less simply because the angle the ball comes off of the string bed is lower. So it might be a little bit confusing, but it will all make sense in the end. And that is the Shotmaker tool. Next, I want to move on to the vibration frequency and stiffness table. So I'm going to pull it up here and we can all have a look. We can choose to order the table in a number of different ways, such as the vibration frequency, the weight, or the stiffness rating, or we can choose to have a direct look at the racket via the drop-down menu. So if I pull up the Prince Vortex 300 gram and scroll down, we'll be able to see that the vibration frequency for this racket is 148 and the stiffness is 65. So starting with the stiffness, this refers to the racket's resistance to bending. So the higher the rating, the more force needs to be applied in order to bend the racket. And the vibration frequency refers to the number of back and forth cycles that the racket undergoes on impact each second. So a higher rating here means that the racket is more resistant to bending. A frame with a higher vibration frequency usually grants the user a little bit more precision. That's because the racket returns to its original shape quicker than another racket with a lower vibration frequency would. So important to bear that in mind. Also, a higher number would indicate more shock, as the impact is spread out over a shorter period of time. So players with injuries to their arm need to bear that in mind when creating their setup. And I've found that vibration frequency is a better indicator of how the racket is going to feel out on court. I use both the stiffness and the frequency, but I place more weight on the frequency as an indicator. So yeah, pretty interesting. And we're going to move on to the next tool. The final tool I like to use is the Racket Recommender, and that is because it has all the specifications condensed into one program, so it makes it pretty convenient for when we are looking up data on the setup. So yeah, if I go through it with you, we have the Prince Vortex in our hand right here. So if I scroll down, Prince Vortex 300 gram version, and we can actually have a look at the table here. Along the x-axis is the swing weight, along the y-axis is the shot speed, and you can actually see a little relationship here. The higher the swing rate, generally the higher the shot speed, although there are outliers. So moving on, if I press go, we'll be able to compare it directly with another racket. So just for convenience, we'll be using the first racket in the list, which is the Babolat Pure Aero 2019 version, and we'll be looking at the power specifications. So if I pull that up, we can see the speed that this racket generates is 66.7 miles an hour compared to the Pure Aero 66.6. We can have a look at the swing speed. Ours is 49.7, whereas the Pure Aero is 49.5. So that would suggest it's a little bit more maneuverable. And next we have ACOR, which stands for Apparent Coefficient of Restitution, otherwise known as the power potential. So all things being equal, the higher this number, the more powerful we can expect the racket to be. And then we have the rest of the table: swing weight, twist weight, and hitting weight. And then you have the mobility specifications, you've got the control specifications, and the final table, which is the spin specifications. And the last bit of data that I like to use is at the bottom of the spin spec table, which is the width. That refers to how wide the racket is from the 3 o'clock position to the 9 o'clock position. So all things being equal, the wider this is, the more spin window you have, which is the more margin for error you have when swinging at a sharp angle to create spin. And more margin for error usually is a good thing. It's important to bear in mind that even though you could have a higher width value here, if the beam itself is quite thick, this again can reduce the margin of error, as the likelihood of the ball clipping the beam as it rolls across the string bed is higher. So yes, just bear that in mind when looking at the width stat. And that is all the racket tools that I like to use in conjunction with my perception and observations out on court. So if there are any tools that you think are important and I've missed out, if you let me know in the comments which ones they are and why, I'll consider including them in future videos. And that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, it might be worth checking out our other videos and those that we've got planned coming out in the future. So until then, everyone, take care.